Tonight, we're traveling back to a time when simply surviving a single day required more strength than most of us will ever need. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let me tell you about lives so difficult they'll make your own troubles seem beautifully simple. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Medieval leech collector life was revoltingly dangerous and more. Imagine wading through stagnant swamps before dawn, your legs covered in blood-sucking parasites that you must carefully collect without being drained by the very creatures that provide your livelihood. You are a leech collector in 13th century France, and your grotesque profession supplies the medical leeches that physicians depend on for bloodletting treatments believed essential for maintaining health. Your work begins in the murky waters of marshes, ponds, and slow-moving streams where medicinal leeches thrive in the organic-rich environment created by decaying vegetation and animal waste. These waters are often contaminated with human sewage and animal refuse, creating breeding grounds for diseases that make your profession as dangerous as it is disgusting. The technique for collecting leeches involves using your own body as bait, wading into infested waters, and allowing the creatures to attach to your legs before carefully removing them and placing them in containers filled with clean water. This process requires you to overcome natural revulsion while managing the very real risks of excessive blood loss, infection, and exposure to waterborne diseases. Your equipment consists of simple containers for transporting live leeches, tools for prying attached parasites from your skin, and basic medical supplies for treating the wounds that inevitably result from repeated leech bites. The containers must be carefully designed to keep leeches alive and healthy during transport to physicians and apothecaries who purchase your gruesome harvest. The health risks associated with leech collecting include not just blood loss and infection from leech bites, but also exposure to waterborne diseases, parasites, and toxins present in the polluted waters where medicinal leeches are found. Your profession requires physical resilience and tolerance for conditions that would quickly incapacitate most people. As evening approaches, and you clean the day's leech bites and prepare your harvest for transport to customers, you carry with you the knowledge that your revolting profession serves essential medical purposes despite its obvious dangers and social stigma. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to wade into contaminated waters, collect more blood-sucking parasites, and endure the physical and social costs of a livelihood that few others are willing or able to pursue. Your work supplies the medical leeches that physicians believe necessary for treating illness and maintaining health, making your disgusting occupation an essential link in the medieval medical system. Aztec human sacrifice priest was spiritually overwhelming and more. Picture yourself standing atop a massive pyramid temple, obsidian knife in hand, as thousands of worshippers below wait for you to tear the beating heart from a living victim and offer it to the gods who control the sun, rain, and fate of the empire. You are a priest of Tenochtitlan, and your sacred duty requires you to perform acts that will haunt your dreams while believing absolutely that the survival of the world depends on your willingness to kill. Your priestly training began in childhood, with rigorous education in astronomy, mathematics, theology, and the complex rituals that govern every aspect of Aztec religious life. The knowledge you've acquired includes not just the technical skills needed for precise sacrifice procedures, but also the theological understanding that frames these acts as essential cosmic maintenance rather than simple murder. The ceremonial preparations for major sacrifices involve days of fasting, purification rituals, and meditation designed to prepare you spiritually for the awesome responsibility of communicating with the divine through human death. Your body is painted with sacred symbols. Your clothing consists of elaborate vestments that mark your priestly rank, and your movements follow precisely choreographed patterns that have been refined over generations. The obsidian knives you use for sacrifice are works of art as much as tools. with blades sharper than any metal knife and handles decorated with precious stones and sacred imagery. These weapons must be prepared and blessed through elaborate ceremonies, and their maintenance requires specialized knowledge of knapping techniques that produce edges capable of cutting through human bone and cartilage with surgical precision. Your victims arrive through various means: prisoners of war, captured in the Flower Wars fought specifically to obtain sacrificial subjects, criminals condemned to death for serious offenses, slaves purchased for religious purposes, and occasionally, volunteers who believe their deaths will bring honor to their families and benefit to their community. Each category of victim requires different ritual procedures and theological justifications. As night falls, and you complete the purification rituals that follow another day of sacred killing, you carry with you the absolute conviction that your actions serve essential cosmic purposes, despite their apparent brutality. Tomorrow may bring new ceremonies, new victims, and new opportunities to demonstrate your dedication to the gods, whose favor ensures the survival of your people and the continuation of the world itself. Your willingness to perform acts that would horrify most human beings reflects not personal cruelty, but religious devotion that places cosmic responsibility above individual conscience, making you both servant of the divine and agent of systematic killing that your civilization considers essential for its survival. Medieval tenor life was disgustingly hazardous and more. Picture yourself standing ankle-deep in a mixture of animal brains, feces, and urine, scraping flesh from hides while the overwhelming stench makes every breath a struggle against nausea. You are a tanner in 14th century Europe, and your essential craft transforms animal skins into leather through processes so foul that your workshops are banished to the outskirts of town. Downwind from respectable neighborhoods, your day begins before dawn with the preparation of fresh hides that arrive from butchers and slaughterhouses, still covered with blood, fat, and scraps of meat that must be completely removed before the tanning process can begin. This preliminary work involves hours of scraping with sharp knives, careful removal of hair and flesh, and washing in cold water that numbs your hands and soaks through even the heaviest clothing. The tools of your trade are simple but essential: curved knives for scraping, wooden beams for stretching hides, and various containers for the chemical solutions that transform raw skin into supple leather. Your knives must be kept razor sharp to work efficiently, but the constant contact with acids and organic matter corrodes metal quickly, requiring frequent sharpening and replacement of tools that wear out under the harsh conditions of tanning. The chemical processes that accomplish the actual tanning involve substances so caustic and foul-smelling that they pose constant health hazards. You work with solutions of oak bark extract, animal brains, dog feces, and urine, both human and animal, that can cause severe burns, respiratory problems, and skin diseases. The medieval understanding of chemistry provides little protection against these occupational hazards. The social stigma attached to your profession affects every aspect of personal and family life. Tanners are considered unclean and often excluded from religious ceremonies, social gatherings, and respectable marriages. Your children inherit this stigma and may be limited to careers in similarly despised trades. The essential nature of your work provides economic security, but at the cost of social acceptance. As evening approaches and you wash the day's grime from your hands and tools, you carry with you the satisfaction of practicing an essential craft that transforms waste products into valuable materials needed throughout society. Tomorrow will bring new hides to process, new challenges to overcome, and new proof that even the most unpleasant work can provide meaning and economic security for those willing to endure its demands. Your leather will become shoes that protect feet, books that preserve knowledge, and armor that saves lives, making your disgusting and dangerous work an essential foundation of medieval civilization. Life as an Inquisition scribe was morally devastating and more. Picture yourself sitting at a wooden desk in a stone chamber, carefully recording testimony that you know will likely result in torture, imprisonment, or death for the person speaking. You are a scribe for the Spanish Inquisition in 15th century Seville, and your meticulous handwriting preserves the words that justify some of history's most systematic religious persecution. Your working environment is designed to intimidate and inspire fear, thick stone walls that muffle screams from adjacent interrogation chambers, heavy wooden furniture that emphasizes the permanence and authority of the institution, and religious imagery that reminds everyone present of the spiritual stakes involved in these proceedings. The smell of parchment and ink mingles with incense and the less pleasant odors associated with fear, confinement, and occasional violence. Your daily routine involves transcribing interrogations, copying legal documents, maintaining records of investigations and trials, and preparing the extensive paperwork required for each case brought before the Inquisition. Every word must be recorded exactly as spoken, every pause noted, every sign of hesitation or contradiction documented for later analysis by the inquisitors who will decide the fate of the accused. The writing materials you use represent significant expense and must be carefully conserved, high-quality parchment for official documents, inferior paper for preliminary notes, and various inks that must be mixed fresh to ensure clarity and permanence. Your quills require constant maintenance and replacement, while the desk at which you work must be positioned to provide adequate light, without allowing you to be distracted by the often disturbing events occurring around you. Your education in Latin, legal terminology, and religious doctrine makes you qualified to understand and accurately record the complex theological and legal arguments that underpin Inquisition procedures. This knowledge also makes you complicit in a system whose intellectual sophistication disguises the brutality of its methods and the arbitrariness of its judgments. As evening falls and you clean your quills and secure the day's documentation in locked files, you carry with you the weight of having participated in a system that transforms religious devotion into institutionalized cruelty. Tomorrow will bring new cases to document, new testimonies to record, and new evidence of the human capacity for both suffering and inflicting suffering in the name of spiritual truth. Your careful handwriting preserves not just legal proceedings, but also a record of how sophisticated institutions can systematically destroy human lives while maintaining the facade of justice and divine authority. Life as a medieval anchorite was profoundly isolated and more. Imagine being sealed into a small stone cell attached to a church wall, with only a narrow window to receive food and another to observe religious services, beginning a voluntary imprisonment that will last until your death. You are an anchorite in 13th century England, and you have chosen to withdraw completely from the world in pursuit of spiritual perfection through absolute solitude and prayer. Your cell, known as an anchor hold, measures perhaps 8 feet by 10 feet, with walls thick enough to muffle all sound from the outside world. The space contains only the most basic furnishings: a narrow bed, a small altar for private prayer, a simple chair, and perhaps a desk for reading and writing. Natural light enters through tiny windows positioned to allow you to participate in church services while preventing visual contact with the outside world. The ritual of enclosure that marked your entry into this life was essentially a funeral. You were declared dead to the world, received last rites, and watched as the door to your cell was sealed with mortar and stone. This ceremony represented not just physical enclosure, but spiritual death and rebirth, transforming you from a worldly person into a living example of complete dedication to divine contemplation. Your daily routine revolves entirely around the canonical hours of prayer, beginning with matins before dawn and continuing through lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. These prayer periods structure your day and provide the rhythm around which all other activities, eating, reading, manual work, and brief rest, must be organized. The absence of external distractions allows for unprecedented focus on spiritual matters, but also creates the risk of obsessive introspection. The food you receive comes through a small window tended by a servant who provides simple meals without conversation or social contact. Your diet is deliberately austere: bread, porridge, vegetables, and water, with occasional additions during religious festivals. The simplicity of this nutrition is intended to minimize bodily distractions while providing adequate sustenance for contemplative life. As night falls and you settle into the profound silence that surrounds your cell, you carry with you the knowledge that tomorrow will bring the same routine of prayer, reading, and contemplation that has filled every day since your enclosure began. The world beyond your walls continues its busy activity, but you have chosen to step outside normal human society in pursuit of spiritual goals that require complete separation from worldly distractions. Your life represents an extreme form of religious dedication that few are called to pursue, but it also demonstrates the human capacity for finding meaning and purpose even in the most constrained circumstances. Life as a medieval witch hunter was psychologically disturbing and more. Imagine spending your days searching for evidence of supernatural evil in the most ordinary aspects of human behavior, where a woman's knowledge of herbs becomes proof of demonic alliance and unusual birthmarks signal diabolic contracts. You are a witch hunter in 16th century Germany, and your profession requires you to see malevolence where others see misfortune, supernatural conspiracy where others see natural events. Your work begins with accusations that filter through communities like poison in a well, whispered reports of failed crops near a particular cottage, suspicions about a widow who lives alone with too many cats, or claims that someone's recovery from illness was unnaturally quick. These accusations, often born from personal grudges, economic disputes, or simple fear of the unexplained, become the foundation of investigations that can destroy lives and tear apart communities. The legal framework that governs witch hunting provides a veneer of judicial procedure over what is essentially sanctioned persecution. You must follow established protocols for gathering evidence, conducting examinations, and obtaining confessions. But these procedures are designed to confirm guilt rather than establish innocence. The Malleus Maleficarum and other witch hunting manuals provide detailed instructions for identifying supernatural evidence that would be laughable if the consequences weren't so deadly. Your examination techniques involve searching accused witches' bodies for devils, marks, moles, scars, or other natural variations in skin that are interpreted as signs of demonic alliance. These examinations are conducted with clinical detachment, but often involve intimate physical contact that adds sexual humiliation to the terror of accusation. Finding such marks is considered proof of guilt, while their absence simply indicates diabolic cunning. The psychological manipulation involved in extracting confessions requires you to understand human nature's breaking points and exploit them systematically. Sleep deprivation, repeated interrogation, threats against family members, and the promise of mercy in exchange for confession all serve to wear down resistance and produce the admissions that justify executions. Learning to read desperation and vulnerability becomes essential for professional success. As night falls and you review the day's investigations and prepare for tomorrow's interrogations, you carry with you the conviction that your work serves essential religious and social purposes, despite its harsh methods and tragic consequences. Your vigilance protects Christian communities from supernatural threats. Your investigations reveal hidden networks of diabolic conspiracy, and your prosecutions demonstrate divine justice, triumphing over satanic evil. The fear and suffering your work creates are unfortunate, but necessary costs of maintaining spiritual purity and social order in a world constantly threatened by supernatural corruption. Life as a Viking shipbuilder was dangerously demanding and more. Picture yourself standing knee-deep in the frigid waters of a Norwegian fjord, shaping oak planks with nothing but an axe, and adze while the bitter wind cuts through your wool clothing. You are a master shipwright in 10th century Scandinavia, and your craft produces the vessels that will carry raiders, traders, and explorers across unknown seas to distant lands. Your day begins before dawn with the selection and preparation of timber that will form the backbone of longships capable of sailing both open ocean and shallow rivers. The oak trees you choose must be perfect, straight-grained, properly aged, and free from knots or defects that could compromise the vessel's integrity in heavy seas. Reading the grain and understanding the properties of different woods is knowledge that takes decades to acquire and can mean the difference between a ship that serves 4 generations and one that breaks apart in its first storm. The tools of your trade are extensions of your body after years of constant use. Broad axes for rough shaping, ADSs for smoothing curves, draw knives for fine finishing, and specialized tools for cutting the complex joints that hold a longship together without nails. Each tool must be kept razor sharp, properly balanced, and perfectly maintained, as your life and the lives of future sailors depend on the quality of your work. Your workshop is located near the water's edge, where finished vessels can be easily launched, but also where you're constantly exposed to harsh weather conditions. The work must continue regardless of rain, snow, or freezing temperatures, as the brief building season in northern climates allows no time for delays. Your hands develop permanent calluses and scars from years of working with sharp tools in cold conditions that make fingers numb and clumsy. The construction process begins with laying the keel, the spine of the ship that determines its strength, speed, and seaworthiness. This single piece of timber, often 30 feet long or more, must be perfectly straight and carefully shaped to provide the foundation for everything else. Any flaw in the keel will be magnified throughout the entire vessel, potentially causing catastrophic failure at sea. As evening falls, and you clean your tools after another day of careful craftsmanship, you carry the satisfaction of creating vessels that will carry brave men across dangerous seas to unknown lands. Your work enables the expansion of Viking civilization, facilitates trade networks that span continents, and produces the ships that will become legendary in the sagas of future generations. Tomorrow will bring new challenges in shaping wood and iron into vessels capable of conquering the world's oceans. Life as a medieval executioner was grotesquely isolated and more. Picture yourself waking in a house that no one will willingly visit, in a profession that society both requires and despises. You are the town executioner in 14th century Germany, and your life is defined by the paradox of being essential to justice, while being shunned by the very community you serve. Your dwelling sits at the edge of town, isolated from respectable neighborhoods, but close enough to the execution ground that you can easily transport the tools of your trade. The house itself is sturdy but unremarkable, distinguished mainly by its location and the fact that neighbors actively avoid your street. Your family, if you have one, shares in your social isolation and bears the burden of your profession's stigma. The tools of your trade are carefully maintained instruments that must function flawlessly when called upon. Your executioner's sword is perfectly balanced, sharp enough to sever a head cleanly, and blessed by the local priest to ensure that its use serves divine justice. The axe for less formal executions, the rope for hangings, and the various implements used for torture during interrogations all require regular maintenance and expert knowledge of their proper use. Your clothing marks your profession as clearly as any uniform, typically dark colors, practical fabrics that won't show bloodstains, and sometimes distinctive elements like a hood or special boots that identify you to the community. When conducting executions, you might wear ceremonial garments that emphasize the solemnity of the occasion, while also protecting your identity from those who might bear grudges against the executor of justice. The public nature of most executions transforms you into a performer in a grim theater where the community gathers to witness justice being served. Your competence is judged not just by the effectiveness of the execution, but also by your ability to conduct the proceedings with appropriate dignity and solemnity. A botched execution reflects poorly on both your professional skill and the legitimacy of the justice system. As evening falls, and you return to your isolated dwelling, you carry with you the weight of another day spent serving a function that society requires but refuses to honor. Tomorrow may bring new death warrants to execute, new prisoners to escort to their final moments, or maintenance tasks that keep your grim profession functioning smoothly. Your work serves the cause of justice and public order, but it extracts a personal cost that few others are willing or able to bear, making you both essential and eternally apart from the community you serve. Being a medieval leper was utterly isolated and more. Imagine waking each morning to the sound of your own wooden clapper, the device that announces your presence and warns healthy people to keep their distance. You are a leper in 13th century Europe, and your disease has transformed you from a member of society into a living ghost, feared, shunned, and forced to exist on the margins of human community. Your day begins with the ritual that has become as natural as breathing, examining your body for new signs of the disease's progression. You check your hands for additional numbness, inspect your feet for new wounds that you cannot feel, and look for changes in the patches of discolored skin that mark you as unclean. Each morning brings the possibility of discovering that the disease has claimed more of your body, stolen more of your sensation, or advanced closer to vital organs. The leper colony where you live is a world unto itself, governed by its own rules and rhythms, but always defined by its separation from the healthy world beyond its walls. The buildings are simple stone and timber structures, designed more for containment than comfort. Your personal space consists of a small cell with a straw mattress, a wooden stool, and perhaps a few personal possessions that you managed to retain. When you were declared legally dead to the outside world, your clothing bears the distinctive markings that identify you as a leper, perhaps a yellow cross sewn onto your robe, or a distinctive colored fabric that signals your status to anyone who might encounter you. These garments are practical rather than decorative, designed to cover the visible signs of your disease, while also marking you as someone to be avoided. The daily routine of the leper colony revolves around the basic necessities of survival and the religious observances that provide structure and meaning to lives that society has deemed worthless. Morning prayers are followed by simple meals, often consisting of bread, thin soup, and whatever vegetables can be grown in the colony's garden. The food is plain but adequate, provided through the charity of religious institutions and the occasional donations of guilty conscience. As night falls over the leper colony and you settle into your narrow bed, you carry with you the knowledge that tomorrow will bring similar challenges and limitations. The disease that has separated you from normal human society continues its slow progression, and the world beyond the colony walls remains largely closed to you. Yet you also carry the deeper knowledge that human dignity and spiritual worth persist, even in the most difficult circumstances, and that communities of mutual support can develop even among society's most marginalized members. Roman gladiator doctor was gruesomely specialized in more. Imagine spending your days treating wounds that would horrify even experienced military surgeons: severed limbs, gaping sword cuts, and trauma injuries inflicted deliberately for the entertainment of cheering crowds. You are a medicus gladiatorium in Imperial Rome, and your specialized practice involves keeping trained fighters alive long enough to die spectacular deaths in the arena, while developing surgical techniques that push the boundaries of ancient medical knowledge. Your clinic adjacent to the gladiator barracks operates like a field hospital during wartime, except that the injuries you treat are inflicted according to precise schedules, designed to maximize entertainment value rather than military necessity. The wounds arrive with predictable regularity, but their severity and type depend on the whims of crowd psychology and the dramatic requirements of different types of gladiatorial combat. The surgical instruments you use represent the most advanced, medical technology available in the ancient world: bronze and iron scalpels, bone saws, forceps for extracting arrows and weapon fragments, and cauterizing irons for sealing wounds that would otherwise prove fatal. These tools must be kept razor-sharp and scrupulously clean, as infection kills more gladiators than combat injuries. Your knowledge of human anatomy exceeds that of most physicians in the Roman world, as your daily work provides unprecedented opportunities to observe the effects of trauma on every system of the human body. This expertise makes you valuable for consulting on difficult cases throughout the city, but it also creates a professional reputation based on your association with institutionalized violence. The gladiators you treat range from condemned criminals who expect to die in their first fight, to seasoned professionals whose survival depends on your ability to heal injuries that would permanently disable ordinary people. Each category of patient presents different challenges. Criminals may be uncooperative or suicidal, while valuable fighters demand treatments that restore not just life, but peak physical performance. As evening falls and you clean blood from your instruments while reviewing the day's surgeries and planning treatment for tomorrow's new casualties, you carry with you the complex knowledge that your medical expertise serves both healing and harm in roughly equal measure. Your innovations in trauma treatment advance human medical knowledge while enabling more efficient production of spectacular violence, making you both healer and collaborator in an industry that transforms human suffering into popular entertainment. Ancient Roman galley slave life was impossibly brutal and more. Picture yourself chained to a wooden bench in the belly of a Roman trireme, where the only light comes from small openings far above and the air is thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and human waste. You are a galley slave, and your existence has been reduced to the simple rhythm of rowing that powers the mighty ships of Rome's imperial navy. Your bench is your entire world, a wooden plank barely wide enough for your body, shared with another slave whose movements must perfectly synchronize with yours to avoid fouling the massive oar that extends through the ship's hull. The chain that connects your ankle to the bench allows just enough movement to work the oar but prevents any hope of escape. This small space, perhaps 6 feet long and 2 feet wide, contains your entire universe for voyages that might last weeks or months. The oar you pull weighs more than most men, requiring the coordinated effort of you and your bench partner to move effectively through the water. The handle is worn smooth by the hands of countless previous slaves, stained with blood from blisters that never heal and marked with the desperate grip of men who know that their lives depend on maintaining the rhythm that drives the ship forward. Your daily routine is governed entirely by the drum that beats out the rowing cadence and the voice of the rowing master who calls out commands from his position on the raised deck. The tempo varies with tactical needs, slow and steady for cruising, rapid and exhausting for battle or pursuit, and sometimes the killing pace of maximum speed that can literally row men to death in a matter of hours. The physical demands of galley rowing exceed what most human bodies can sustain for extended periods. Your muscles develop the specific strength needed for the rowing motion, but they also break down from the constant stress and inadequate recovery time. Shoulders become permanently hunched, backs curve from the rowing position, and hands develop calluses so thick they split and crack with each stroke. Your diet consists of whatever food can be efficiently delivered to rowing benches during brief rest periods, usually thin gruel, stale bread, and water that might be fresh or might be brackish, depending on supplies and circumstances. Eating while chained to your bench requires coordination with your bench partner and speed that allows you to consume whatever nutrition is available before the drum resumes its relentless beat. The sanitation conditions in a galley's rowing decks are appalling by any standard. With hundreds of men chained to benches for weeks at a time, human waste accumulates faster than it can be cleaned, creating health hazards that contribute to disease and death among the rowing crews. The smell becomes so overwhelming that even the crew members who have alternatives avoid the rowing decks, except when absolutely necessary. As another day ends and the ship drops anchor in some foreign harbor, you remain chained to your bench, while free men above enjoy rest, food, and the simple pleasure of movement. Tomorrow will bring more hours of synchronized rowing, more commands to obey, and more proof that your life has been reduced to a single function in service of Rome's naval power. Yet somehow you endure, finding strength in the small human connections possible even under these conditions, and maintaining hope that survival itself represents a form of victory against the forces that seek to reduce you to nothing more than a rowing machine. Ancient Egyptian pyramid builder life was backbreakingly harsh and more. Imagine waking before dawn in a workers' village near the Giza Plateau, where the Great Pyramid of Khufu rises like a geometric mountain against the desert sky. You are one of thousands of laborers whose lives are dedicated to moving massive limestone blocks, one by one, to build monuments that will outlast civilization itself. Your day begins with a meal of bread, beer, and onions, simple fare designed to provide energy for the enormous physical demands ahead. The bread is coarse and gritty, made from emmer wheat that includes sand from the grinding process. The beer is weak but safer than water, and it provides necessary calories for the day's labor. The onions help prevent scurvy and other nutritional deficiencies common among workers who eat limited diets. Your work gang consists of 20 men who have trained together to move blocks weighing several tons each. You've developed a rhythm and coordination that allows the group to function as a single organism, but this unity comes at the cost of individual autonomy. Every movement must be synchronized, every effort coordinated, and any failure by one member jeopardizes the safety and productivity of the entire team. The limestone blocks you move each day are quarried from nearby sites and shaped by skilled stoneworkers before reaching your work gang. Each block weighs between 2 and 15 tons, requiring the combined effort of multiple work gangs using ropes, levers, ramps, and carefully placed rollers. The physics of moving such massive weights with primitive tools requires precise technique, split-second timing, and enormous physical strength. Your tools are simple but effective copper chisels for shaping stone, wooden levers for moving blocks, hemp ropes that can support tremendous weight, and wooden rollers that reduce friction during transport. These tools must be maintained constantly, sharpened regularly, and replaced frequently due to the enormous stresses placed on them. A broken rope or damaged lever can result in serious injury or death when working with multi-ton blocks. The ramp system that allows blocks to be moved to higher levels of the pyramid is a marvel of engineering that requires constant maintenance and modification as construction progresses. You spend part of each day rebuilding and extending these ramps, which must be strong enough to support the weight of massive blocks, while also providing an inclined surface that work gangs can navigate safely. The medical care available to pyramid workers reflects the Egyptians' advanced understanding of trauma treatment and orthopedic medicine. You have access to doctors who can set broken bones, treat cuts and bruises, and provide pain relief for the chronic injuries that result from years of heavy labor. This medical attention is motivated by practical rather than humanitarian concerns. You represent a significant investment of time and money, and your owner wants to protect that investment. As evening approaches and the workday finally ends, you return to the workers' village, carrying the satisfaction of contributing to one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements. Your muscles ache with honest fatigue, and your hands bear the calluses and scars that mark you as someone who builds monuments for eternity. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new blocks to move, and new contributions to a pyramid that will stand long after the civilization that built it has been forgotten. Life as an Aztec farmer was impossibly demanding and more. Picture yourself waking before dawn on a floating garden in Lake Texcoco, where the morning mist rises from the water and your feet touch the artificial soil that your ancestors built, reed by reed. You are a Masai wall, a commoner in the great Aztec Empire, and your life revolves around the endless cycle of cultivation that feeds the massive city of Tenochtitlan. Your chinampas, the floating agricultural plots that outsiders will one day call floating gardens, require constant maintenance and back-breaking labor. These artificial islands, constructed from layers of mud, vegetation, and human waste, must be reinforced daily to prevent them from washing away or sinking. You wade through the shallow waters in the pre-dawn darkness, checking the wooden stakes and red barriers that hold your crops above the lake's surface. The work begins with harvesting the previous day's crop of maize, beans, squash, and chili. Peppers, the sacred plants that form the foundation of Aztec civilization. Every plant must be examined individually, with diseased or damaged specimens removed to prevent contamination of healthy crops. The harvest timing is critical. Too early, and the yield is poor. Too late, and the entire crop might be lost to weather or pests. Your tools are simple but effective. Wooden digging sticks, obsidian blades sharper than any metal knife, and baskets, woven from lake reeds. The obsidian, while incredibly sharp, is also fragile and requires constant replacement and resharpening. You've learned to knap your own blades from volcanic glass, a skill that takes years to master and leaves your hands permanently scarred from countless small cuts. The transportation of crops from your floating gardens to the great market of Tlatelolco requires careful planning and physical endurance. You load your canoe with produce, paddling through the network of canals that connect your chinampa to the main waterways. The journey can take hours, and you must navigate through heavy traffic of other farmers, fishermen, and merchants, all trying to reach the market before the best-selling opportunities are gone. The tribute system that governs Aztec society means that a significant portion of your harvest goes directly to the state, regardless of your family's needs. Tax collectors arrive regularly to assess your production and collect their required share, leaving you with barely enough to feed your family and plant next season's crops. This tribute might be paid in maize, beans, textiles, or labor service, but it's always calculated to extract maximum value from your work. Your daily diet consists primarily of the crops you grow, supplemented occasionally with fish from the lake and insects that can be gathered from the water plants. Meat is a rare luxury, reserved for religious festivals and special occasions. You've learned to appreciate the subtle flavors of different preparations of maize, from simple tortillas to complex stews that incorporate beans, peppers, and whatever other ingredients are available. The religious obligations that permeate Aztec life require significant time and energy alongside your agricultural work. You participate in community ceremonies, maintain household shrines, and make regular offerings to ensure the continued fertility of your crops. These rituals aren't merely symbolic. You genuinely believe that the gods' favor determines whether your family eats or starves. The seasonal flooding of Lake Texcoco presents annual challenges that test your engineering skills and physical endurance. When the waters rise, you must quickly reinforce your chinampas and evacuate what crops you can to higher ground. When they recede, you face the back-breaking work of rebuilding damaged structures and replanting destroyed crops. These cycles of destruction and renewal are as predictable as they are exhausting. Your children learn agricultural techniques from infancy, beginning with simple tasks like weeding and gradually advancing to more complex skills like soil preparation and crop rotation. Education is practical, and immediate mistakes in farming technique can mean starvation. So every lesson must be learned thoroughly and immediately applied. The knowledge you pass down has been refined over generations and represents the accumulated wisdom of countless farmers. As the sun sets over Lake Texcoco and you paddle your canoe back to your chinampa after another day of relentless labor, you carry with you the knowledge that tomorrow will bring similar challenges and demands. The cycle of planting, tending, harvesting, and tribute payment continues endlessly, shaped by the rhythms of nature and the requirements of empire. Yet there's also satisfaction in the knowledge that your work feeds the greatest city in the Americas, and that your skill and dedication help sustain one of history's most remarkable civilizations. Life as a medieval executioner was grotesquely isolated and more. Picture yourself waking in a house that no one will willingly visit, in a profession that society both requires and despises. You are the town executioner in 14th century Germany, and your life is defined by the paradox of being essential to justice, while being shunned by the very community you serve. Chapter 1. The Executioner's Dawn. Your dwelling sits at the edge of town, isolated from respectable neighborhoods but close enough to the execution ground that you can easily transport the tools of your trade. The house itself is sturdy but unremarkable, distinguished mainly by its location and the fact that neighbors actively avoid your street. Your family, if you have one, shares in your social isolation and bears the burden of your profession's stigma. The morning begins with the ritual inspection of your tools, instruments that must function flawlessly when called upon. For a botched execution reflects poorly on both your professional skill and the legitimacy of the justice system. Your executioner's sword is perfectly balanced, its blade honed to razor sharpness through hours of careful maintenance. The steel gleams in the early morning light, unmarked by rust or imperfection, for this weapon must sever a head cleanly. With a single stroke, the leather-wrapped handle fits your grip precisely, worn smooth by years of use, yet maintained in perfect condition. The axe serves for less formal executions, those condemned criminals whose social status doesn't merit the swift death of the sword. It too requires constant care, its edge kept sharp enough to split wood or bone with equal efficiency. The hickory handle must be checked regularly for cracks or weakness that could cause it to fail at the crucial moment. Beside these primary tools hang the ropes for hangings, each one examined strand by strand for fraying or weakness. Hemp rope ages and weakens with exposure to weather, and a rope that breaks during execution creates a grotesque spectacle that undermines the solemnity of justice. Your clothing marks your profession as clearly as any uniform. Dark colors predominate, black and brown fabrics that won't show bloodstains, practical rather than decorative. The garments are well made but plain, designed for function rather than fashion. When conducting executions, you don ceremonial vestments that emphasize the gravity of the occasion while also concealing your identity from those who might bear grudges against the executor of justice. The executioner's hood, though dramatic in appearance, serves the practical purpose of protecting you from recognition by family members of the condemned or political factions opposed to particular sentences. The legal framework that governs your work requires understanding not just the physical techniques of execution, but also the procedural requirements that ensure each death serves justice rather than vengeance. You must verify the identity of condemned prisoners, checking their faces against written descriptions and confirming with court officials that proper procedures have been followed. The documents that authorize execution must be examined carefully. Forged papers could make you complicit in murder rather than an agent of lawful punishment. Your relationship with condemned prisoners begins when they're placed in your custody, usually the night before execution. Some approach death with dignity, spending their final hours in prayer or quiet contemplation. Others rage against their fate, requiring physical restraint to prevent suicide or attacks on guards. A few break down completely, requiring you to drag or carry them to the scaffold. Learning to manage these varied responses requires psychological strength and practical experience with human nature under extreme stress. The spiritual dimensions of your work create complex relationships with local clergy. Most priests understand the necessity of lawful execution, but struggle with the theological implications of taking human life, even in service of justice. Some refuse to provide last rites to condemned criminals, while others insist on elaborate confession rituals that delay executions and complicate your schedule. You must balance respect for religious authority with the practical requirements of your profession. Navigating disputes about timing, procedure, and the spiritual preparation of prisoners. The public nature of executions transforms you into a performer in a theater of justice where the community gathers to witness the triumph of law over crime. Your competence is judged not just by the effectiveness of the execution, but by your ability to conduct proceedings with appropriate dignity and gravity. The crowd's mood affects every aspect of the event. Sympathetic audiences might heckle you for executing popular criminals, while hostile crowds could turn violent if they believe justice is being perverted or delayed. Managing crowd psychology requires understanding the political and social currents that affect public opinion about particular cases. Political executions create especially volatile situations where supporters of the condemned might attempt rescue or revenge, while opponents demand harsh treatment that goes beyond legal requirements. Religious executions involving heretics or accused witches often attract crowds whose fervor can quickly turn into mob violence directed at anyone perceived as insufficiently zealous in pursuing orthodoxy. The economic aspects of your profession provide steady income but limit opportunities for financial advancement. Payment comes from multiple sources: fixed fees from municipal authorities for each execution, additional payments for torture during interrogations, and sometimes gratuities from families grateful for quick, merciful deaths. The income is reliable, but modest, and social stigma prevents investment in other businesses or professional advancement beyond your current role. Your training in the executioner's craft likely began as apprenticeship to an experienced practitioner, learning through observation and gradually taking on increasing responsibilities. The knowledge required includes not just physical techniques, but understanding of human anatomy, crowd management, legal procedures, and the psychological skills needed to cope with regular exposure to death and suffering. This education is entirely practical. There are no schools for executioners, no written manuals, only the accumulated wisdom passed down through generations of practitioners. Anatomical knowledge becomes crucial for efficient execution. Understanding the precise location of neck vertebrae allows you to position your blade for clean decapitation, while knowledge of major blood vessels helps you avoid messy accidents that create disturbing spectacles. The angle and force of the blow must account for the condemned person's height, weight, and physical condition. Sick or elderly prisoners require different techniques than healthy young adults, while the emotional state of the condemned affects their muscle tension and posture in ways that influence the execution method. The tools of torture used during interrogations represent another aspect of your professional responsibilities. Thumbscrews, the rack, and various other devices require technical knowledge and controlled application to extract confessions without causing death or permanent disability that might interfere with subsequent execution. The line between effective interrogation and sadistic cruelty must be carefully maintained, as excessive torture could invalidate confessions or create sympathy for criminals that undermines public support for their execution. Psychological preparation for your work involves developing mental strategies for managing the emotional impact of regularly taking human lives. Some executioners adopt religious frameworks that frame their work as divine service, carrying out God's judgment against sinners. Others maintain emotional distance through professional detachment, viewing execution as technical challenges rather than moral dilemmas. A few develop drinking problems or other coping mechanisms that help them manage guilt and social isolation. The social isolation that defines your existence affects every relationship and interaction. Merchants may refuse to serve you, innkeepers might deny you lodging, and potential marriage partners face social pressure to avoid association with your profession. Children learn to fear and avoid you, while adults cross the street rather than acknowledge your presence. This systematic exclusion creates a form of social death that parallels the physical deaths you inflict professionally. Your children, if you have any, inherit your social contamination regardless of their personal character or abilities. They may be excluded from schools, apprenticeships, and social activities based solely on their parentage. Many executioner families become hereditary castes. with sons following fathers into the profession, not from choice, but from lack of alternatives. Daughters face limited marriage prospects, often marrying into other stigmatized professions or remaining unmarried dependents of their families. The hereditary nature of your profession creates complex family dynamics. Sons may resent being forced into a despised career, while daughters struggle with the social limitations imposed by their family name. Some families attempt to break the cycle by relocating to distant communities where their background isn't known. But the specialized skills of execution are difficult to conceal, and the profession's requirements often force eventual exposure. Guild membership and civic participation are generally denied to executioners, excluding you from the economic and social networks that provide security and advancement opportunities for other craftsmen. This exclusion affects not just professional development, but also access to mutual aid societies, religious brotherhoods, and political participation that define normal citizenship. You exist on the margins of society, essential to its functioning, but excluded from its benefits. The legal protections available to executioners vary significantly between jurisdictions and historical periods. Some communities provide official support and protection for their executioners, recognizing that social stigma makes the position difficult to fill. Others offer minimal protection, leaving executioners vulnerable to violence from families of executed criminals or political factions opposed to particular sentences. Understanding local laws and customs becomes essential for personal safety and professional survival. International variations in execution methods and legal procedures mean that executioner skills aren't easily transferable between different regions. French executioners use different techniques than German practitioners, while English methods differ from both continental approaches. This regional specialization limits professional mobility and career opportunities, as moving to new areas requires learning different techniques and establishing new relationships with legal authorities. The seasonal patterns of criminal justice affect the frequency and timing of your work. Winter months often bring fewer executions due to reduced court activity and the practical difficulties of conducting outdoor events. In harsh weather, spring and summer see increased activity as courts clear their dockets and favorable weather makes public executions more feasible. These patterns allow for periods of relative normalcy, interrupted by intense periods of professional activity. Record-keeping and documentation requirements involve maintaining logs of executions performed, methods used, and any unusual circumstances that arose during proceedings. These records serve both administrative purposes and historical documentation, creating archives that track the administration of justice over time. Your documentation might be consulted years later in appeals cases or historical research, making accuracy and completeness essential. The relationship between executioners and other legal officials, judges, bailiffs, prison guards, and court clerks requires diplomatic skills despite social barriers. These professional relationships are essential for the smooth functioning of the justice system, but they're complicated by the social stigma attached to your position. Some officials maintain cordial working relationships while preserving social distance, while others treat executioners with barely concealed disdain or hostility. Quality control in execution work involves ensuring that sentences are carried out according to legal specifications, while maintaining the dignity and effectiveness that public justice requires. Different types of execution carry different social meanings: hanging for common criminals, beheading for nobles, burning for heretics, and the method used must match both legal requirements and social expectations. Mistakes in procedure could invalidate the execution legally or create public disorder that undermines the authority of the justice system. The apprenticeship system for training new executioners creates complicated family and professional relationships when the occupation is passed down through generations. Teaching sons or nephews the craft involves not just technical instruction, but but psychological preparation for a life of social isolation and moral complexity. Some families resist continuing the tradition, while others embrace it as providing economic security despite social costs. Regional specialization in different types of execution creates professional hierarchies among executioners. Those skilled in complex procedures like breaking on the wheel or elaborate public executions might travel between communities, commanding higher fees and greater professional respect. Simple hangmen occupy the bottom of the profession, while experts in torture and interrogation represent specialized branches that require additional training and offer greater income potential. The disposal of executed criminals' bodies involves complex, legal, religious, and practical considerations. Some executions specify particular treatment of remains, public display, burial in consecrated ground, or denial of Christian burial depending on the crime and social status of the condemned. Your responsibility for managing these arrangements requires understanding religious law, public health concerns, and family wishes when applicable. Crowd control during executions becomes increasingly important as public events grow larger and more volatile. Understanding mob psychology helps you anticipate problems and coordinate with civil authorities to maintain order. Riots during executions can quickly escalate into broader civil unrest, making crowd management a skill as important as technical competence with execution methods. The international trade in execution techniques and equipment creates professional networks that span national boundaries. Executioners share information about new methods, improved tools, and effective procedures through correspondence and occasional travel. These professional relationships provide technical education, while also offering emotional support from others who understand the unique challenges of the profession. Innovation in execution methods reflects both technological advancement and changing social attitudes toward punishment and public spectacle. New tools and techniques promise more efficient or humane executions, while evolving legal standards require adaptation to new procedural requirements. Balancing innovation with tradition requires careful consideration of legal, social, and practical factors that affect the effectiveness and acceptability of different approaches. As evening falls and you clean and store your tools after another day serving the cause of justice, you carry with you the weight of work that society requires but refuses to honor. Tomorrow may bring new death warrants to execute, new challenges in managing public opinion and legal requirements, and new confrontations with the moral complexity of a profession that serves essential social functions while extracting enormous personal costs. Your isolation from normal social life is the price you pay for serving as society's instrument of final justice, making you both essential and eternally separate from the community whose laws you enforce through the ancient and terrible power of life and death. Chapter 2. The condemned and their stories. The prisoners who come into your custody arrive through various paths that reflect the complex social and legal systems of medieval justice. Some are common criminals, thieves, murderers, rapists whose crimes have shocked local communities and demanded ultimate punishment. Others are political prisoners whose only crime was opposing the wrong faction at the wrong time. Victims of noble feuds or religious conflicts who find themselves condemned for treason or heresy. A few are simply unfortunate souls caught in circumstances beyond their control, blamed for crimes they may not have committed or punished under laws they never understood. Each condemned prisoner presents unique challenges that require adaptation of your methods and approach. Young criminals often face death with bravado that masks terror, requiring careful management to prevent escape attempts or suicide that could rob justice of its public satisfaction. Elderly prisoners may be physically frail, requiring assistance to reach the scaffold and special consideration in choosing execution methods that account for their condition. Women prisoners, though rare, create particular complications due to social attitudes about gender and punishment that affect both crowd reaction and procedural requirements. The nobility who occasionally find themselves under your axe present complex protocol challenges that reflect the intricate social hierarchies of medieval society. Noble prisoners often expect special treatment that acknowledges their rank even in death, private rather than public execution, use of the sword rather than the rope, and burial arrangements that preserve family honor despite criminal conviction. Managing these expectations while fulfilling legal requirements requires diplomatic skills and understanding of social customs that extend far beyond technical competence in execution methods. Religious criminals, heretics, apostates, and accused, witches create the most volatile execution scenarios due to the passionate feelings they evoke in both supporters and opponents. Heresy trials often involve complex theological questions that divide learned opinion, while witch trials tap into deep-seated fears about supernatural threats that make rational discussion nearly impossible. The crowds that gather for religious executions tend to be larger and more emotional than those attending secular punishments, requiring enhanced security measures and careful crowd management. Political prisoners represent perhaps the most dangerous category for executioners, as their deaths can trigger broader conflicts that threaten social stability. Executing supporters of rival nobles or opposing religious factions risks creating martyrs, whose deaths inspire further resistance or revenge attacks. The families and followers of political prisoners may attempt rescue operations, bribery, or intimidation to prevent execution, while opponents may demand public spectacles that exceed legal requirements and create precedents for future political prosecutions. The confession rituals that precede execution serve multiple purposes beyond spiritual preparation of the condemned. Public confession acknowledges guilt and validates the justice of the sentence, while private confession may reveal information about accomplices or other crimes that haven't been prosecuted. Managing the timing and content of confessions requires coordination with religious authorities, who oversee spiritual preparation, and legal officials, who seek practical information for ongoing investigations. Some prisoners maintain their innocence until the final moment, creating awkward situations where the execution proceeds despite persistent denials of guilt. These cases often reflect the limitations of medieval legal procedures that rely heavily on circumstantial evidence, torture-induced confessions, or social prejudices that target unpopular individuals. As executioner, you must carry out sentences regardless of personal doubts about guilt or innocence, maintaining professional objectivity while privately questioning the justice of particular cases. The family members of condemned prisoners often approach you seeking favors, quick death to minimize suffering, preservation of the body for proper burial, or simple reassurance that their loved one will be treated with dignity in their final moments. These interactions require balancing human compassion with professional obligations, as showing favoritism could undermine your reputation for impartial service, while excessive cruelty might provoke family revenge or community hostility. Wealthy prisoners or their families sometimes attempt bribery to secure preferential treatment or even escape. These offers present moral and practical dilemmas that must be carefully managed. Accepting bribes risks exposure and prosecution, while refusing them might provoke hostility from powerful families capable of making your life difficult. Some executioners develop standard policies for managing such approaches, while others handle each case individually based on circumstances and risk assessment. The medical condition of prisoners affects both execution methods and timing. Sick prisoners may need medical treatment to ensure they're capable of understanding their punishment, while pregnant women require delays until after childbirth. Prisoners who attempt suicide or self-harm create complications that may require restraint or medical intervention to preserve them for legal execution. Understanding basic medical principles becomes important for assessing prisoner condition and selecting appropriate execution methods. Language barriers sometimes complicate communication with foreign prisoners, who don't speak the local language, ensuring that condemned individuals understand the charges against them and the nature of their punishment may require interpreters or simplified communication methods. These linguistic challenges can delay proceedings and create confusion about legal requirements. While cultural differences in attitudes toward death and punishment may affect prisoner behavior in unexpected ways, the timing of executions involves complex considerations that balance legal requirements, practical logistics, and social factors. Market days attract larger crowds but also create security challenges. While religious festivals may require avoiding execution dates that conflict with sacred observances, weather conditions affect both crowd size and execution logistics, as rain or snow can make outdoor events dangerous and unpleasant for all participants. Special execution methods required for specific crimes create additional technical challenges that test your professional skills. Breaking on the wheel, burning at the stake, or drawing and quartering require specialized knowledge and equipment that may be used infrequently enough to make maintenance of skills difficult. These elaborate executions also attract larger crowds and create greater opportunities for public disorder that requires enhanced security measures. The psychology of facing death manifests differently in different individuals, requiring adaptive approaches to prisoner management. Some condemned criminals become deeply religious in their final days, spending hours in prayer and seeking redemption through spiritual preparation. Others become fatalistic, accepting their fate with resignation. That makes them easy to manage, but sometimes disturbing to observe. A few maintain defiance or anger until the end, requiring physical restraint and careful handling to prevent disruption of execution proceedings. Children and adolescents condemned to death present particularly challenging cases that test both professional competence and personal conscience. Medieval law often treats juvenile criminals as adults for purposes of punishment. But executing young people creates moral dilemmas and public relations challenges that affect community support. For the justice system, special procedures may be required to accommodate the physical and psychological differences between adult and juvenile prisoners. The final meal tradition allows condemned prisoners a last taste of worldly pleasure before facing eternal judgment. Managing these requests requires balancing humanity with practicality, as elaborate meals may be impossible to provide while simple fare seems inadequate for the solemnity of the occasion. Some prisoners request specific foods that have personal or cultural significance, while others refuse food entirely as a form of spiritual preparation or political protest. Last visits from family members create emotionally charged situations that require careful supervision to prevent escape attempts while allowing meaningful farewells. These meetings often involve intense emotional displays that can affect the mood of other prisoners and complicate security arrangements. Balancing compassionate flexibility with security requirements demands judgment and experience that develops over years of handling similar situations. The clothing worn by condemned prisoners during execution carries symbolic meaning that must be carefully managed. Some jurisdictions require specific garments that reflect the nature of the crime or the social status of the prisoner, while others allow personal clothing that maintains individual dignity in death. The condition and appearance of prisoner clothing affects public perception of the execution and may influence crowd reaction in ways that complicate security and crowd control. Documentation of final words and behavior serves both legal and historical purposes, creating records that may be consulted in appeals cases or used by scholars studying criminal justice history. Accurate recording of these details requires attention and memory skills that complement the physical aspects of execution work, while discretion about sensitive information protects both legal proceedings and family privacy. The spiritual preparation of prisoners involves coordination with religious authorities who provide last rites, hear final confessions, and offer prayers for the condemned. These religious observances serve important social functions by reinforcing moral order and providing comfort to prisoners and their families. But they also create scheduling complications and procedural requirements that must be integrated with legal and practical execution arrangements. Chapter 3. Tools, Techniques, and the Craft of Death. The mastery of execution requires understanding that each method serves different legal, social, and practical purposes within the complex framework of medieval justice. Your expertise must encompass not just the physical techniques of killing, but the symbolic meanings, legal requirements, and social expectations that surround different forms of execution. This knowledge represents a craft tradition passed down through generations of practitioners, refined through experience, and adapted to local customs and legal systems. The executioner's sword represents the pinnacle of your craft, a weapon designed specifically for the swift decapitation that serves as both punishment and mercy. Unlike military swords built for combat, your blade is carefully balanced for overhead strikes that must sever bone and tissue cleanly with a single blow. The steel must be of exceptional quality, free from hidden flaws that could cause the blade to chip or break at the crucial moment. The weight distribution between blade and handle is precisely calculated to provide maximum force while maintaining control and accuracy. Maintenance of the execution sword requires daily attention and specialized knowledge passed down through generations of practitioners. The blade must be kept sharp enough to cut through neck vertebrae without binding or deflection, but not so sharp as to become brittle and prone to chipping. Oil and cloth protect the steel from rust and corrosion, while careful storage prevents damage from handling or environmental exposure. The edge is honed using stones of different grades, starting with coarse material to establish the proper angle and finishing with fine stones that create the razor keenness necessary for clean cuts. The positioning and stance required for effective sword execution demand years of practice to master. Your feet must be placed precisely to provide stable footing while allowing full range of motion for the overhead stroke. The condemned prisoner must be positioned to present the optimal target, neck extended and head steady, while restraints prevent movement that could deflect the blow or create injury rather than clean death. The timing of the stroke requires coordination between your movement and the prisoner's position, as any hesitation or awkwardness can result in partial cuts that create horrific spectacles. Hanging represents a more common but technically complex execution method that requires understanding of rope behavior, knot construction, and the physics of strangulation. The quality of rope affects both the efficiency and appearance of hanging. Hemp fibers must be properly twisted and treated to provide strength without excessive stretch, while the thickness must balance strength against the need for proper knot formation. Old or damaged rope can break under load, creating embarrassing failures that undermine the dignity of justice and require repeating the execution with new equipment. The construction of the hangman's noose involves specific knot techniques that ensure proper tightening and positioning during execution. The number of coils in the knot affects both its holding power and the speed of death, while the placement on the condemned person's neck determines whether death comes from broken neck, bones, or gradual strangulation. Different judicial traditions specify different approaches to these technical details, requiring you to master multiple techniques and understand when each is appropriate. The gallows structure itself must be carefully designed and maintained to support the weight and stress of hanging executions. The crossbeam must be strong enough to support both the condemned person's weight and the sudden shock of the drop, while the platform must be positioned at the correct height to ensure proper fall distance. Trapdoors require precise engineering to open quickly and completely, while ladder or stair access must be secure enough to prevent accidents during the final procession. Drop calculations for hanging involve complex relationships between the condemned person's weight, height, and physical condition that determine the distance needed for quick death versus gradual strangulation. Too short a drop results in slow death by strangulation that creates disturbing spectacles and prolonged suffering. While excessive drop distance can result in decapitation, that defeats the purpose of hanging as a distinct form of execution. These calculations require mathematical skills and anatomical knowledge that represent sophisticated technical expertise. The axe serves for executions that require forceful chopping rather than the clean cuts of sword work. Beheading with an axe demands different techniques than sword execution, as the heavier blade and different balance point require modified stance and swing patterns. The condemned person must be positioned differently, usually kneeling with head placed on a chopping block that provides solid support for the blow. Multiple strikes may be necessary with an axe, requiring psychological preparation for repeated blows and the ability to continue despite the gruesome appearance of partial success. Maintenance of execution axes involves many of the same principles as sword care, but with additional attention to the handle and head attachment. The hickory or ashwood handle must be checked regularly for cracks or weakness that could cause failure during use, while the metal head must be secured tightly to prevent loosening that could result in the head flying off during execution. The cutting edge requires different sharpening techniques than sword blades, as the thicker profile and different cutting angle require specialized approach to edge geometry. Burning at the stake represents the most complex and controversial execution method, reserved primarily for heretics and witches whose crimes are considered threats to spiritual as well as civil order. The construction of the pyre requires understanding of combustion principles and fuel characteristics that ensure adequate heat for quick death, while maintaining the symbolic meaning of purification through fire. Different types of wood burn at different rates and temperatures, while the arrangement of fuel affects air circulation and burning efficiency. The preparation of condemned prisoners for burning involves considerations of both humanity and symbolic meaning. Strangulation before burning serves to minimize suffering while preserving the appearance of death by fire. But this mercy must be concealed from crowds who expect to witness complete punishment. The positioning of the prisoner and the construction of restraints must balance security against the symbolic requirement that the condemned appear to face divine judgment voluntarily. Torture during interrogation requires specialized equipment and techniques designed to extract confessions without causing death or permanent disability that might interfere with subsequent execution. The rack stretches joints and muscles beyond normal limits, creating intense pain while usually avoiding permanent injury if properly operated. Thumbscrews apply precisely controlled pressure to sensitive areas, while various heating and crushing devices create pain levels that break down resistance without necessarily causing lasting damage. The psychology of effective interrogation involves understanding human responses to pain and fear, identifying the pressure points that will break individual resistance most efficiently. Some prisoners respond to physical pain, while others are more affected by threats to family members or promises of mercy in exchange for cooperation. Reading these individual differences and adapting interrogation methods accordingly requires experience and intuitive understanding of human nature under extreme stress. Medical knowledge becomes essential for both torture and execution work, as understanding anatomy and physiology helps you achieve desired results while avoiding unintended consequences. Knowledge of major blood vessels helps you avoid fatal cuts during torture, while understanding nervous system responses helps you interpret prisoner reactions and adjust techniques accordingly. Basic first aid skills may be needed to treat injuries that occur during interrogation, while knowledge of drug effects helps you understand prisoner behavior that might be affected by medication or poisoning. The timing and pacing of torture sessions require balancing effectiveness against prisoner health and legal requirements. Extended torture sessions may break resistance more completely, but also increase the risk of death or disability that could invalidate confessions or prevent subsequent execution. Multiple shorter sessions may be more effective than single prolonged torture, while rest periods allow prisoners to recover enough for meaningful confession, while also demonstrating mercy that validates the justice of legal proceedings. Documentation of torture and confession requires accurate recording that preserves legal validity while also protecting the reputation of the justice system. The specific techniques used, duration of application, and prisoner responses must be recorded in ways that demonstrate both the necessity of torture and the restraint shown by interrogators. These records may be reviewed by higher authorities or used in appeals proceedings, making accuracy and completeness essential for legal validity. Special execution methods for specific crimes require mastery of techniques that may be used infrequently, but must be performed competently when required. Drawing and quartering involves careful coordination of horses and equipment to achieve the symbolic dismemberment while managing the gruesome spectacle in ways that serve justice rather than mere entertainment. Breaking on the wheel requires precise application of force that breaks bones systematically while preserving life long enough for complete punishment. The tools and equipment required for these special executions often must be constructed specifically for individual cases, as the infrequent use doesn't justify maintaining specialized apparatus. Understanding basic carpentry and metal becomes important for creating gallows, wheels, pyres, and other execution equipment that meets both functional and symbolic requirements. Quality control in construction prevents equipment failure that could turn solemn justice into farce or create additional suffering beyond legal requirements. Crowd management during executions requires understanding of human psychology and group behavior that helps you anticipate and control potential problems. The positioning of execution equipment affects crowd flow and visibility, while timing of proceedings influences crowd, mood, and attention span. Security arrangements must balance public access with safety requirements, creating clear sight lines for spectators while preventing crowd surge or rescue attempts. Weather considerations affect both execution logistics and crowd behavior in ways that require advanced planning and adaptive responses. Rain makes outdoor executions dangerous and unpleasant, while wind can affect burning or hanging executions in ways that create safety hazards or symbolic problems. Cold weather reduces crowd size but may also affect equipment function, while heat can cause medical emergencies among spectators that disrupt proceedings. The international exchange of execution techniques and equipment creates opportunities for professional development, while also raising questions about standardization and quality control. Different regions develop specialized approaches to common execution methods, while innovative techniques from one area may prove useful in others. Correspondence with other executioners provides professional education, while also offering emotional support from others who understand the unique challenges of the profession. Innovation in execution methods reflects changing legal requirements, technological advancement, and evolving social attitudes toward punishment and public spectacle. New tools and techniques promise more efficient or humane executions, while improved understanding of anatomy and physics suggests modifications to traditional approaches. Balancing innovation with tradition requires careful consideration of legal, social, and practical factors that affect the acceptability and effectiveness of different execution methods. Chapter 4: The Social Burden and Moral Complexity. The weight of social isolation presses upon every aspect of your existence, creating a parallel universe where normal human relationships become impossible and simple daily activities require navigation of complex social barriers. Your profession marks you as fundamentally different from other members of society, essential to its functioning, yet excluded from its benefits, feared and respected simultaneously, needed but never welcomed. The marketplace presents daily reminders of your social status as merchants and customers alike react to your presence with combinations of fear, disgust, and morbid curiosity. Some vendors refuse to serve you entirely, claiming religious or personal objections to dealing with someone whose hands regularly shed blood. Others charge inflated prices, taking advantage of your limited options and social vulnerability. A few treat you with professional courtesy while maintaining careful emotional distance, conducting business efficiently while avoiding the personal connections that characterize normal commercial relationships. Children provide perhaps the most honest reactions to your presence, fleeing in terror or staring with fascination at the figure they've been taught represents death itself. Their parents quickly pull them away, whispering warnings about staying clear of the executioner's house and avoiding contact that might somehow contaminate them with violence. These childhood encounters shape generational attitudes that perpetuate social isolation long after specific executions are forgotten. Religious participation becomes complicated by theological questions about the spiritual status of someone whose profession involves taking life, even in service of lawful justice. Some clergy welcome you as a servant of divine justice, arguing that legal execution serves God's will by punishing sin and maintaining moral order. Others maintain that taking life corrupts the soul, regardless of legal authorization, requiring special penances or exclusions from certain religious observances. These theological disputes affect your access to spiritual comfort and community worship that provides meaning and support for others. Marriage and family relationships face enormous pressures from social stigma that affects not just you, but anyone who associates with your household. Potential spouses must weigh personal feelings against social consequences of marrying into a despised profession, while children born into executioner families inherit stigma that limits their educational and professional opportunities. Some families attempt to break the cycle by relocating to distant communities, but the specialized nature of execution skills often forces eventual exposure of professional background. The hereditary nature of your profession creates complex family dynamics that affect multiple generations. Sons may resent being forced into a career they find morally troubling or socially isolating, while daughters face limited marriage prospects and social restrictions based on family identity rather than personal character. These family tensions can create cycles of resentment and self-loathing that affect mental health and family relationships across generations. Economic limitations extend beyond simple income restrictions to encompass broader barriers to financial security and advancement. Guild membership, which provides economic protection and professional development for other craftsmen, is generally denied to executioners. Investment opportunities may be limited by social prejudice that prevents business partnerships or property ownership in desirable locations. These economic barriers create vulnerability and dependence that make it difficult to leave the profession even when personal circumstances might otherwise support career change. Legal protections for executioners vary significantly between jurisdictions and historical periods, creating uncertainty about personal safety and professional security. Some communities provide official protection and support, recognizing that social stigma makes the position difficult to fill and essential services hard to maintain. Others offer minimal legal protection, leaving executioners vulnerable to violence from families of executed criminals or political factions opposed to particular sentences. The psychological toll of regularly taking human life affects different individuals in different ways, but all executioners must develop coping mechanisms for managing the emotional impact of their work. Some adopt religious frameworks that interpret execution as divine service, finding meaning in the belief that they serve God's justice against sin. Others maintain emotional distance through professional detachment, viewing each execution as a technical challenge rather than a moral dilemma. Alcohol provides escape for some executioners who find temporary relief from social pressure and moral complexity in drinking that may develop into dependency. The social isolation that prevents normal recreational activities makes taverns and drinking companions attractive despite the additional social stigma that may accompany association with known drunkards. Balancing the need for emotional relief against the professional requirements for steady hands and clear judgment creates ongoing tension between personal needs and professional obligations. Sleep disturbances and nightmares often plague executioners who cannot completely separate their professional and personal lives. Dreams of past executions, anxiety about upcoming assignments, and general stress from social isolation can create chronic sleep problems that affect both health and job performance. The absence of normal social support networks makes it difficult to address these psychological symptoms through conventional means. Relationships with other executioners provide essential emotional support, but also reinforce professional isolation from broader society. These professional relationships often become the closest social connections available, as only others in the same profession can truly understand the unique challenges and moral complexities of execution work. Letters and occasional meetings with executioners from other regions provide opportunities for technical education and emotional support that aren't available from other sources. The moral questions that surround execution work create ongoing internal conflicts that must be managed through philosophical and religious frameworks that provide meaning and justification for taking life. Some executioners develop elaborate theological justifications that frame their work as essential service to divine justice, while others adopt utilitarian approaches that emphasize the social benefits of deterring crime through visible punishment. These philosophical frameworks help maintain psychological equilibrium, but may also create conflicts when individual cases challenge established moral beliefs. Witnessing the final moments of condemned prisoners provides intimate exposure to human responses to mortality that can profoundly affect personal attitudes toward life and death. Some executioners develop deep appreciation for life's fragility and value, becoming more compassionate and thoughtful as a result of their professional experiences. Others become hardened and cynical, viewing human life as cheap and death as merely another technical challenge to be managed efficiently. The political implications of execution work create additional stress and moral complexity, as legal sentences may reflect political expediency rather than genuine justice. Executing political prisoners whose only crime was opposing the wrong faction at the wrong time requires carrying out orders that may conflict with personal beliefs about justice and fairness. These situations test professional objectivity against moral conscience in ways that create lasting psychological conflict. Retirement from execution work presents practical and psychological challenges that are unique to this profession. The skills and knowledge that define your career have limited transferability to other occupations, while social stigma may persist long after professional retirement. Some former executioners attempt to reinvent themselves in distant communities, while others remain associated with their former profession throughout their lives due to the difficulty of escaping established social identity. The legacy questions that affect all executioners involve considering how your work will be remembered and what meaning can be found in a career devoted to taking life. Some find satisfaction in serving justice and maintaining social order, believing that their work contributes to the common good despite personal costs. Others struggle with questions about whether any positive legacy can emerge from a profession built on ending human lives. Regardless of legal justification, community memory of particular executions often focuses more on the crimes and criminals than on the executioner who carried out sentences. But your reputation for competence and professionalism affects how future generations remember the administration of justice during your era. Efficient, dignified executions that serve justice without unnecessary suffering contribute to positive perceptions of legal authority, while botched or cruel executions can undermine public confidence in the justice system. The historical significance of your work extends beyond individual executions to encompass broader questions about medieval approaches to crime, punishment, and social control. Your detailed knowledge of execution methods, legal procedures, and community reactions provides valuable insights into the values and beliefs that shaped medieval society. This knowledge represents a form of historical documentation that may prove valuable for future scholars studying the development of legal systems and social attitudes. The training and professional development that you provide to apprentices and assistants creates a lasting impact that extends beyond your individual career. The skills, techniques, and professional standards that you pass on to the next generation of executioners influence the quality and character of execution work for years after your retirement or death. This educational responsibility adds meaning to your work, while also creating obligations to maintain high standards and ethical practices. The international connections that you maintain with executioners in other regions create networks of professional knowledge and support that transcend national boundaries. These relationships contribute to the standardization and improvement of execution techniques, while also providing emotional support for practitioners who face similar challenges in different locations. The exchange of letters, visits, and technical information helps maintain professional standards and provides opportunities for learning new approaches to common problems. The technological innovations that you contribute to execution methods represent attempts to make your work more efficient, humane, or effective in serving the purposes of justice. Improvements in tool design, execution procedures, or crowd management techniques may seem minor individually, but collectively contribute to the evolution of capital punishment practices that affect thousands of future cases. Personal relationships with legal officials, clergy, and community leaders require careful navigation of professional obligations and social barriers that affect your ability to perform your duties effectively. Maintaining working relationships with judges, bailiffs, and prison guards requires professional competence and diplomatic skills, while managing relationships with religious authorities involves balancing respect for spiritual authority with practical execution requirements. The seasonal rhythms that govern legal proceedings affect your work schedule and income in ways that require careful financial planning and professional adaptation. Winter months often bring reduced execution activity due to weather limitations and reduced court sessions, while spring and summer create busy periods that require intense focus and physical endurance. These cyclical patterns affect both immediate work demands and long-term career planning. The geographic mobility that some executioners develop through traveling to serve different communities creates opportunities for professional development, while also increasing social isolation and family disruption. Traveling executioners may earn higher fees and gain broader experience, but they also face the challenges of working in unfamiliar legal systems and managing equipment transportation while maintaining professional standards under varying conditions. The record-keeping responsibilities that accompany execution work serve both administrative and historical purposes that add complexity to your professional duties. Accurate documentation of methods used, procedures followed, and outcomes achieved creates archives that support legal proceedings while also preserving historical information about medieval justice systems. These records require literacy skills and attention to detail that complement the physical aspects of execution work. The quality control standards that govern execution work involve maintaining consistency and reliability in procedures that serve justice while meeting community expectations for dignity and effectiveness. Professional reputation depends on competent performance that demonstrates both technical skill and appropriate respect for the gravity of taking human life. These standards create pressure for continuous improvement, while also providing motivation for professional pride and achievement. The succession planning that affects executioner families involves decisions about whether to continue the hereditary tradition or attempt to break cycles of social stigma that limit opportunities for future generations. These decisions affect not just individual families, but also communities that depend on execution services and may face difficulties. finding qualified replacements if hereditary succession is interrupted, crisis management during problematic executions, requires quick thinking and adaptive responses that preserve the dignity of justice while managing unexpected complications. Equipment failures, prisoner resistance, crowd disturbances, or medical emergencies can transform routine executions into complex situations that test professional competence and judgment under pressure. Your ability to handle these crises affects both immediate execution outcomes and long-term professional reputation. The philosophical questions that surround capital punishment create ongoing intellectual challenges that require engagement with fundamental questions about justice, mercy, and the proper role of government in responding to crime. Your practical experience with execution provides unique insights into these theoretical questions, while also creating personal stakes in debates about the morality and effectiveness of capital punishment. Professional development opportunities for executioners are limited but include opportunities for learning new techniques, improving existing skills, and developing additional competencies that enhance career prospects. Some executioners develop expertise in related areas such as torture, investigation, or prison management that provide additional income sources while building on existing professional knowledge. The environmental impact of execution work includes considerations about waste disposal, resource consumption, and the broader ecological effects of maintaining execution sites and equipment. While these concerns rarely dominated medieval thinking, practical issues like wood consumption for gallows and pyres, disposal of biological waste, and maintenance of execution grounds created ongoing resource requirements that affected community planning and budgets. The cultural significance of execution work extends beyond immediate legal functions to encompass broader symbolic meanings about justice, authority, and social order that affect community identity and values. Your role in public executions makes you a participant in cultural rituals that reinforce social bonds while also defining community boundaries between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. The weight of the blade, as you stand in your modest dwelling at the edge of town, cleaning the tools of your trade by the flickering light of a single candle. The weight of your profession settles upon you like a familiar cloak. Tomorrow may bring new assignments, new prisoners to escort to their final moments, new challenges in balancing the demands of justice against the requirements of humanity. Or tomorrow may pass in the quiet maintenance of equipment and the endless waiting that characterizes much of executioner life. The sword gleams in the candlelight, its polished blade reflecting not just illumination, but the accumulated weight of every life it has taken in service of medieval justice. Each nick in the handle, each careful repair to the blade, each hour spent in maintenance represents not just professional obligation, but participation in the ancient human struggle to balance order against chaos, justice against mercy, social necessity against individual conscience. Your house stands as a monument to the contradictions that define your existence, substantial enough to reflect the importance of your work, isolated enough to acknowledge your social contamination, comfortable enough to provide basic human needs, yet austere enough to reflect the gravity of your profession. The garden you tend in spare moments grows herbs and vegetables that nourish your family, while also providing some connection to the cycles of creation that balance your professional association with death. The children who once fled from your approach now grow into adults who understand the necessity of your work while maintaining the careful distance that social convention requires. Some may even feel grudging respect for your competence and professionalism, recognizing that dignified execution serves community interests. Even when they cannot bring themselves to acknowledge you as fully human, the ledger in which you record executions performed, methods used, and unusual circumstances encountered represents more than mere administrative documentation. It stands as testament to your service in one of humanity's most difficult and necessary roles. Each entry reflects not just a life ended but a community's decision to enforce its values through ultimate punishment, a choice that requires someone willing to serve as society's instrument of final justice. The letters from other executioners, carefully stored and occasionally reread, provide connection to the only community that truly understands the challenges and complexities of your profession. These professional relationships, maintained through correspondence and occasional meetings, create networks of mutual support that help sustain individuals who must function outside normal social boundaries while performing essential community services. The tools arranged carefully in their cases represent centuries of accumulated knowledge about the technical requirements of ending human life efficiently and with appropriate dignity. Each implement embodies the wisdom of countless practitioners who faced similar challenges and developed solutions that balance effectiveness against humanity, serving justice without descending into cruelty or chaos. Your reflection in the polished blade reveals the face of someone who has seen too much of human nature's darkest aspects, while also serving its highest aspirations for order and justice. The lines around your eyes speak of sleepless nights and moral struggles, while the steadiness of your hands reflects the professional competence that allows you to perform impossible tasks with precision and dignity. The silence of the evening hours provides space for contemplation of the moral questions that your profession raises, but cannot finally answer. The balance between justice and mercy, the relationship between individual conscience and social duty, the question of whether any person has the right to take another's life, even in service of law. These dilemmas remain as complex and troubling as they were on the day you first accepted the executioner's blade. Yet in the quiet moments between assignments, in the careful maintenance of equipment that ensures swift and merciful death, in the professional competence that serves both justice and humanity, there is perhaps a form of meaning that transcends the obvious moral complexity of your work. You serve as the instrument through which society enforces its deepest values, the final guardian of the boundary between order and chaos, the human face of abstract justice that must sometimes manifest in concrete and terrible form. The weight of the blade in your hands is more than physical. It carries the accumulated burden of every execution performed, every family torn apart by crime and punishment, every community decision to enforce its values through ultimate penalty. Yet it also represents the possibility of justice prevailing over chaos, of societies finding ways to protect themselves from those who would destroy the bonds that make civilization possible. As you prepare for sleep in a house that stands at the edge of two worlds, the community you serve and the isolation your service requires, you carry with you the knowledge that tomorrow will bring new challenges to your professional competence and personal conscience. The tools of your trade wait in their places, ready for whatever demands justice may make upon your skills and courage. Your life stands as testimony to the human capacity for undertaking impossible roles in service of necessary functions. 4. Finding meaning and purpose even in work that extracts enormous personal costs. For maintaining dignity and professionalism while serving as society's instrument of final judgment. In learning to bear the weight of the blade, you have perhaps discovered something essential about the burdens that civilization places upon those who serve its deepest needs, while remaining forever separate from its ordinary comforts and rewards. The candle burns low as the night deepens, casting dancing shadows that seem to contain the ghosts of all those who have faced your blade in service of medieval justice. Tomorrow will bring what tomorrow brings, new assignments or quiet maintenance, public executions or private preparations, the endless cycle of service that defines executioner life. But tonight, in the silence of your isolated dwelling, you rest in the knowledge that your work serves purposes larger than individual comfort or social acceptance, maintaining the terrible and necessary balance between justice and chaos that allows human communities to survive and flourish despite the darker aspects of human nature. The executioner's blade reflects not just candlelight, but the complex, moral weight of a profession that serves justice through the taking of life, maintains order through the application of ultimate force, and protects society through the willing sacrifice of normal human relationships and social acceptance. In accepting this burden, you join the long line of those who have chosen duty over comfort, service over popularity, the greater good over personal ease, making you both essential to civilization and forever separate from its ordinary pleasures and rewards.